The wind howled across the straits of Tsushima as black sails pierced the mist. From the sea, an armada of hundreds of ships advanced like a moving fortress. On their decks stood warriors clad in iron and leather, carrying weapons the samurai of Japan had never seen before. It was the year 1274, and the Mongol Empire, masters of half the known world, had come to Japan. This story is based on real history. It begins with fire, steel, and betrayal. And the battle that followed would change the fate of a nation forever. On the shore at Komoda Beach, the clans of Tsushima gathered. Banner after banner rose into the dawn wind, Clan Shimura, Clan Sakai, Clan Adachi, and others, proud names of samurai blood. At their head rode Lord Shimura, the Jito of Tsushima, his nephew Jin Sakai at his side. Fewer than 1,000 warriors stood against the countless invaders approaching the bay. Still, their resolve did not falter. The code of Bushido demanded it. Shimura raised his sword toward the sea. Today, he declared, his voice carried by the crashing surf, we fight for our land, for our ancestors, for Japan. Drums thundered from the Mongol fleet. A single rider, carrying the challenge of parley, approached the shoreline. But when the Mongol emissary dismounted, he offered no duel of honor. Instead, he drew a torch and hurled it at the samurai envoy, burning him alive before their eyes. Then the Mongols opened fire. Explosions ripped across the sand. Arrows tipped with fire, strange thunderous weapons that roared like dragons, and volleys of poisoned bolts rained down upon the defenders. Horses shrieked, men fell screaming, and the beach turned red with blood. Still, the samurai charged. Jin rode at the front lines, his blade flashing as he cut down 1, 2, 3 foes. Yet for every Mongol he felled, 10 more advanced. Their shields locked, their discipline unbroken, their weapons merciless. Samurai duels turned into slaughter. By nightfall, the tide of battle was broken. The clans of Tsushima were shattered. Lord Shimura was captured alive, dragged in chains before the enemy commander, Koden Khan, cousin to the great Khan himself. Jin Sakai, struck down by arrows and blades, lay bleeding in the surf, his armor shattered. The last thing he saw before the world went dark was the Mongol banners rising over Castle Kaneda. When he awoke, it was not among comrades but in the care of a thief. Her name was Yuna. She told him the truth, Tsushima had already fallen. The Mongols marched unchecked, burning villages, enslaving farmers, executing samurai. Shimura still lived, a prisoner of the Khan. But unless something changed, all of Japan would share the same fate. Jin, the last of his clan, swore an oath that night. He would rescue his uncle, defeat the invaders, and drive them back into the sea. But the code of honor, the way of the samurai, had already failed. To fight the Mongols, he would need to become something else. Something feared. Something unseen. Thus began the legend of the Ghost of Tsushima, a warrior born of both honor and shadows. And soon, the first strike against the Khan would set all of Japan ablaze. Night cloaked the mountains as Jin Sakai climbed toward Castle Kaneda. Smoke from Mongol fires choked the air, carrying the stench of burning wood, flesh, and oil. From the ramparts, the enemy's banners swayed in triumph, while prisoners' cries echoed from within. Lord Shimura was held there, and Jin swore he would free him or die trying. But he was no longer the same warrior who had charged at Komoda Beach. His near death, his humiliation, had carved doubt into him. Yuna, the thief who had saved his life, offered a different path. Fight like they do, she urged. Strike from the shadows. Break their lines before they ever see you coming. It was a betrayal of everything Jin had been taught. The code of the samurai demanded open combat, honor, and courage. Yet the memory of Komoda's massacre burned in his mind. Honor had led them to ruin. Perhaps dishonor could save Japan. The first strike came in the forests outside Komoda. A Mongol patrol marched along the road, laughing as they dragged a farmer by his hair. From the trees, Jin loosed an arrow, dropping the lead soldier before the rest could raise their shields. Then he emerged like a shadow, slashing through armor with steel. When the last man fell, the farmer stared in awe, whispering, "A ghost." Word spread quickly. Villagers began to whisper of a spirit who struck down Mongols when least expected, a phantom samurai risen from Komoda's ashes. Fear spread through the enemy camps, while hope flickered among the oppressed. But not all welcomed this change. Master Ishikawa, the famed archer, joined Jin in the fight but warned him. Every step you take from the samurai's path cannot be undone. Do you wish to save your uncle, or abandon him for shadows? The answer came when Jin gathered allies for a daring plan. He would storm Castle Kaneda. With Ishikawa's bow, Lady Masako Adachi's vengeful blade, and Yuna's cunning, he struck like a storm. They lit Mongol siege engines aflame, cut down guards, and freed prisoners who joined their cause. Yet betrayal awaited him. Ryuzo, once his trusted friend, led the Straw Hat Ronin to aid the Mongols in exchange for gold and survival. The Ronin turned their blades against Jin, and blood was spilled between brothers in arms. Barely escaping with his life, Jin pressed on, scaling Kaneda's walls under cover of night. Inside the fortress, he found Lord Shimura in chains. Their reunion was brief. Koten Khan himself awaited. The Mongol leader was unlike any foe Jin had known, calm, patient, ruthless. He fought not only with the sword but with fire, deception, and unyielding will. When Jin struck, the Khan parried. When Jin pressed forward, the Khan countered with force like a storm. In the end, Jin was hurled from the bridge into the icy waters below. Defeat once more. Shimura remained in chains, and the Khan advanced deeper into Tsushima. Yet even as Jin drifted into unconsciousness, he clutched at a single truth: the ghost would rise again. And next time, he would not fight with honor. He would fight to win. Rain returned to Tsushima, a cold veil that hissed on dying embers and washed the blood from stones. He moved through it like a shadow given breath. He cut a rope here, lifted a latch there, left tied captives and stunned sentries in his wake. He spared who could be spared, struck where it mattered, and vanished before shouts could gather into alarm. Word spread across valleys and rice paddies: a man had risen from Komoda's ruin, and he did not fight like other men. Farmers whispered a name with frightened hope: the ghost. Allies came one by one. Master Ishikawa, the famous archer whose arrows once taught lords humility, returned with a grim nod and a quiver full of answers. Lady Masako Adachi, last survivor of a slaughtered clan, pledged her vengeance to Jin's cause and demanded only Mongol heads in payment. Kenji, a sake peddler with more nerve than honesty, promised to carry messages and smuggle blades under barrels. Yuna walked point, saw what others missed, and reminded him that survival was a victory, too. The work needed a craftsman. In a soot-stained forge, Yuna's brother Taka listened, eyes bright with danger. You want to climb where walls meet the sky? Then hold tight. He hammered until dawn, tempering an iron claw with a length of braided rope. In Taka's hands, necessity became invention. When Jin tested it on a cliff above a Mongol road, the claw bit stone, the rope sang, and for the first time since Komoda Beach, his heart lifted. He could go where honor never allowed. Every night, a new strike. Granaries burned so quietly that smoke only rose after dawn. Herds were turned loose to starve the invaders of meat. Messengers vanished and reappeared bound and gagged outside liberated villages. Ishikawa taught the farmers to loose volleys at drumbeats. Masako drilled them to break from cover and return before the enemy could close. Jin chose all the angles, always the small cut that bled a giant. Koten Khan answered with bounties. A price hung over the ghost, payable in gold or mercy. It drew old friends to dangerous thinking. Ryuzo arrived on a wet morning, the straw hat ronin at his shoulder like ragged shadows. He smiled the way hungry men smile when they see a door open. You still owe me a duel, he said lightly, though his eyes never left Jin's hands. They drank rainwater from a gourd and talked of old days, of laughter on the beach and sparring matches no one could ever judge. Then Ryuzo's voice cooled. The Khan pays for the ghost. Feed my men. Save them. Or I feed them with your head. Jin gripped the gourd until it creaked. Help me take Castle Kaneda. Then I will feed them with the whole island. That night the mountain above Kaneda was a throat-swallowing thunder. Taka's claw carried Jin up the cliff, one silent rise after another, until he felt the wind that lives on ramparts. He lowered lines for Yuna and Masako, then signaled once. Torches flared in the lower courtyard, Kenji's barrels, sake for the victors, revealed as oil. A spark raced. Fire blossomed. Panic took root. They moved like rain through reeds. Ishikawa's arrows found watchmen before cries could form. Jin slid along mud-slick tiles and dropped into the inner ward. There, beyond iron bars and wet straw, Lord Shimura knelt, still wearing the dignity of command as armor. For a breath, nephew and uncle looked at one another through years of discipline and a single night of shame. Then keys turned, chains fell, and the Jito rose. The gate to the keep boomed open. Straw hats poured in, blades low, mouths set. Ryuzo stepped forward, face unreadable. For a heartbeat, it seemed he had come as promised. Then Mongols flanked him, shields raised, and Ryuzo spoke too softly. Forgive me. He raised his sword. Jin moved first, steel ringing, the courtyard erupting in a tangle of blades and flashing rain. The straw hats were quick, starving but dangerous, trained by the same dawn drills that shaped Jin's youth. He fought to turn edges aside rather than spill what loyalty remained. A horn sounded from the outer wall, Ishikawa's archers answered, Masako slammed the inner doors with a bar. In the crush, Ryuzo faced Jin. Old friends circled in mud that mirrored the storming sky. I asked for food, Ryuzo said. The Khan offers certainty. Jin's reply was a single cut that disarmed him. I offer you a path, he said, breath steady despite the ache in his arms. For a moment Ryuzo wavered, then a Mongol captain barked, arrows hissed, and the straw hat leader retreated behind shields with a glare that promised another meeting. They broke the enemy formation with smoke and sudden silence. Yuna tossed a pot that burst into blinding ash, Ishikawa's next volley stitched a line that shepherded the Mongols backward, Jin and Masako drove a wedge for Shimura to cross. When the last gate fell inward, the Jito raised his voice, not a shout, but a command polished by decades. Forward. Samurai prisoners seized dropped spears and reclaimed their names. Castle Kaneda changed hands before the storm spent itself. But the victory tasted of iron. The Khan was gone, his banners pulled from the walls and sent north with the dawn. In the quiet that followed, Lord Shimura's gaze settled on the broken doors and the bodies that lay in shadowed corners. You used smoke, he said flatly. You moved unseen. You poisoned wells of courage. Jin bowed his head, rain dripping from his lashes. I used what would save our people. The way of the samurai saves our people, Shimura answered, the old creed pressed like a seal onto wet wax. Not tricks. Not fear. He gripped his nephew's shoulder as if he could hold him in place by will alone. Your heart is true. Do not let the ghost devour it. Below them, villagers climbed the slope with bundles of food for prisoners turned liberators. Kenji exaggerated his part until Yuna elbowed him quiet. Taka stood in the gate's shadow, staring at his iron claw as if unsure whether to be proud or afraid of what he had made. Kaneda had fallen. The ghost had risen. And far to the north, where the wind smelled of snow and iron, Koden Khan prepared a new stroke, one that would test not only tactics and blades, but the bond between uncle and nephew, lord and vassal, samurai and the shadow he could not unlearn. The bells of Tsushima rang for war. Across villages and ruined fields, banners once thought lost were raised again. The ghost strikes had given the people courage, but courage alone could not drive back an empire. To reclaim Castle Shimura and break the Mongol advance, Jin needed an army. So he turned to those who still held strength in hidden corners. At the temple of Kushi, warrior monk Norio gathered his brothers. Clad in robes stained with ash and blood, they lifted their naginata and vowed to fight. In Yurikawa, a clan once disgraced, Jin found men who still burned with resentment against the shogunate. They hated Shimura, but when Jin spoke of Tsushima's survival, they listened. In the end, even enemies swore their blades to the ghost. And then there was Goro, a pirate with no loyalty but to coin. Yet he alone could slip through Mongol ships and carry a petition to the mainland. Lord Shimura's words begged the shogun for reinforcements, and more, to name Jin as his heir. For the first time, Jin felt the weight of not only his uncle's pride, but his hope for a future bound by blood. Before the army marched, Jin returned to his family's home. From Yuriko, the old caretaker, he claimed the armor of Clan Sakai, plates lacquered in deep blue, polished helm crowned with antlers, and a weight that was more than iron. Yuriko also taught him the secret of poison, powders that could turn drink into death. Jin took it, though Shimura would call it dishonor. War had no patience for purity. The assault on Castle Shimura began at dawn. Reinforced by peasants, monks, pirates, and exiled samurai, the Ghost's army surged against Mongol fortifications. Lord Shimura rode at the front, his sword a banner in itself. Jin fought at his side, blades carving through armored soldiers. For a moment, it seemed the tide was turning. Then the Khan revealed his cruelty. Explosives planted beneath the bridge erupted as samurai charged across. Fire engulfed men and horses alike, and the river carried shattered bodies downstream. Screams drowned in the roar of flames. The Mongols pressed, merciless. Jin knew another charge would only mean death. Shimura urged honor, another frontal assault. But Jin turned instead to shadows. He scaled the cliffs, slipped past sentries, and poured Yuriko's poison into Mongol arag. When they drank, they fell gasping, clawing at their throats. In the confusion, Jin struck down Ryuzo, once his brother, now a traitor bound to the Khan. But Khoten Khan escaped again, retreating north to prepare his final strike. Though Castle Shimura fell back into Japanese hands, Shimura saw only disgrace. "You fight without honor," he told Jin, fury shaking his voice. "You shame our name." Jin answered with iron in his tone. "Honor is useless against men who know none." Their victory had saved Tsushima for the moment. But between uncle and nephew, a rift had opened, wide as the sea itself. And in the shadows of the north, Khoten Khan sharpened his blade for the final act of conquest. The smoke of Castle Shimura still clung to the sky when Jin and his allies moved north. Victory had been claimed, but it was hollow. Mongol banners still flew across half the island, and Khoten Khan prepared for a strike that would end all resistance. Among the ranks was Taka, Yuna's brother, a blacksmith turned warrior by necessity. His grappling hook had carried Jin over walls, his tools had armed the Ghost's rebellion, but in his eyes still lingered doubt. He was no samurai, no seasoned fighter. Yet Jin treated him as an equal. "Your courage is worth more than any sword," Jin told him. For the first time, Taka believed it. But the Khan was cunning. He knew Jin could not be broken by steel alone. So he struck at the heart. When Jin and Taka infiltrated a Mongol fortress in search of Ryuzo, they walked into a trap. Chains bound them, torches cast long shadows, and before them stood Khoten Khan. Calm, patient, his voice like a blade sliding from its sheath. "You are a man torn," the Khan said to Jin. "One foot in honor, one in shadows. You could have ruled with me. Instead, you hide behind a mask of death." Then he turned to Taka. "Kill him," the Khan ordered. "Prove your freedom. Take the Ghost's head, and live." Taka's hands trembled as the Mongols pressed a blade into them. He looked once at Jin, then at the Khan. A moment's silence stretched into eternity. Then Taka roared, not with fear but defiance, and hurled himself at the Khan. Steel met flesh. The strike was brave, but clumsy. The Khan caught his wrist, wrenched the blade, and with a single motion, cut him down. Before Jin's eyes, Taka fell. His head was severed and tossed into the dirt like nothing more than spoil. Rage burned away Jin's chains. He broke free, cutting through guards, his sword screaming vengeance. Mongols fell, straw hats scattered, but the Khan escaped once again, leaving only blood and grief. When Yuna learned of her brother's death, her scream carried through the camp like a broken bell. She struck the earth, struck the walls, struck anything her fists could find. But in the end, she knelt beside Jin, her tears hardening into iron. Then we kill them all, she swore. The Ghost's war grew darker. No longer merely ambushes and raids, now it was terror. Poisoned food, assassinations in the night, villages freed with fire and steel. To the Mongols, the Ghost became a nightmare. To the people, he was hope. And to Lord Shimura, he was becoming a monster. The shogun's reinforcements arrived, and Shimura took command of the new army. With banners unfurled, they launched the grand assault to retake Castle Shimura in full. The Mongols fought savagely, detonating explosives, hurling fire from engines, but the samurai advanced. This time, the Ghost's tactics spared countless lives. Yet instead of gratitude, Shimura's face hardened. You spilled dishonor as easily as blood, he told Jin. The shogun will not forgive. Still, the Ghost could not stop. Taka's death had lit a fire that no code could quench. And somewhere beyond the mountains, Koden Khan waited, preparing his fleet, preparing his poison, preparing to strike at Japan itself. Snow fell on Tsushima's northern plains, muffling the clash of war. Yet no silence could conceal the storm building between nephew and uncle. With Castle Shimura reclaimed, Jin should have stood triumphant. Instead, he stood accused. Shimura denounced his methods as dishonor, his poisons as corruption, his tactics as betrayal of the samurai code. The shogun's decree sealed it, Clan Sakai was to be disbanded. Jin Sakai, once heir to honor, was now a traitor. Shimura urged him to scapegoat Yuna, to preserve his life. But Jin refused. If being samurai means abandoning those who fight beside me, then I am no samurai. That night, Shimura burned the decree naming Jin his heir. The bond between them, uncle and nephew, lord and vassal, was ash. Soldiers loyal to Shimura bound Jin in chains. Yet his allies, Masako, Ishikawa, Norio, Yuna, would not abandon him. They cut him free, but in the escape, Jin's loyal horse was struck down by arrows, carrying him one final distance before collapsing. Jin laid a trembling hand upon its mane. Rest, my friend. Then he walked into the storm alone. News reached him like a dagger, the Mongols had learned to craft his poison. Koden Khan would unleash it, not only on Tsushima, but on the Japanese mainland. If he succeeded, entire provinces would choke and die. The fate of the nation now rested on the Ghost's shoulders. He rode north with his allies, gathering strength for one final strike. At Port Izumi, the Khan had built his stronghold. Warships crowded the harbor, their sails black with the promise of invasion. The Khan stood on his flagship, calm as ever, watching Japan's future like a hunter studying prey. Jin's plan was simple: chaos in the harbor, shadows in the night, and death delivered to the Khan's heart. With allies striking from land and sea, Jin infiltrated the fleet. Fire arrows turned the docks into an inferno. Samurai clashed with Mongols on the piers. Amid the roar, Jin cut his way through ship after ship until he reached the Khan's vessel. The duel was inevitable. Koden Khan faced him with blade and fire, every strike heavy as thunder. Jin fought with all he had learned: samurai steel, ghost cunning, the fury of a man who had lost everything. The deck burned beneath their feet, timbers splitting, sails collapsing. The clash ended with Jin's blade buried deep in the Khan's chest. At last, the conqueror fell. But victory carried no peace. With the Khan dead, the Mongol threat began to crumble. Yet Lord Shimura came to Jin with a final command. The shogun declared the ghost a danger, a symbol too powerful, a man too free. To preserve the order of Japan, Jin had to die. And Shimura himself had been ordered to carry out the execution. On a quiet hillside of golden leaves, uncle and nephew faced one another. Not as enemies, not entirely as family, but as two men bound by duty and torn by love. The duel was fierce, yet mournful, each strike heavy with memory. When Jin's blade found its mark, Shimura fell to his knees. His voice was calm, though his eyes carried sorrow. "Give me a warrior's death." Jin trembled. The ghost within him urged mercy, the samurai within urged duty. Whether he granted Shimura death or spared him, the truth remained, Jin Sakai no longer belonged to the world of samurai. The ghost had become an enemy of the shogun, a protector of the people, a legend that could not be contained. From that day, the Mongols still feared the shadows of Tsushima. Villagers whispered thanks at roadside shrines. Samurai cursed his name but could not deny his victories. And Jin, neither lord nor outlaw, continued his war, not for honor, not for glory, but for the island itself. The battle that shook Japan had ended. But the ghost had only just begun. Thank you for watching this story of courage, betrayal, and destiny. If you enjoyed this cinematic retelling of history, make sure to subscribe for more epic tales of samurai, legends, and the battles that shaped Japan.